Jordan Reddout and Gus Hickey are the showrunners and writers of The Other Black Girl on Hulu. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. I wanted to start with a question for both of you, which is, the series is obviously based on a novel by Zakiya Dalila Harris. What was your first exposure to the novel, and what aspect, was there a moment or just a particular aspect of the novel that really, excited you and made you see how it could translate to the screen? Let's start with you, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, I read it when it came out, like long before I knew that there was going to be a television show, and loved it, and made all of my family members and friends read it also. And I just really identified with Nella's journey of being this soul Black woman in white spaces, because I was a classical musician, and then going to Harvard, and then entering the world of TV comedy writing is I was always alone for a long, long time. And thankfully that has shifted, especially since 2020. But I really, really connected with that feeling of isolation and the feeling of someone coming along who you think could be an ally. And then maybe it doesn't go that way.
How about you, Gus?
Yeah, and I mean, I think we both really were attracted to the tone of the novel in terms of adapting it. It really hits a lot of subject matter that Jordan and I like to write about, and also I think we always have this not mandate, but we always have this like reason behind our writing that we want to have a sense of humor, because a lot of the subject matter of this novel and a lot of the subject matter of the world in general is very sad, and it's really tough. And especially if you are alone or if you are an outsider, and for Jordan and me, for a gay man and a Black woman, I think it's like we totally feel that all the time, and you have to have this sense of humor in order to survive. And I think that really is present in the novel, and it's really specific to Nella, our protagonist, and we really wanted to maintain that. And when we read it, we were just like, oh, this woman, and probably this author, we don't mean to put that on to Zakiya, but probably this author kind of sees the world the way that we do and sees the ridiculousness, and that's where the humor comes from. So we definitely wanted to maintain that.
You both touched on a lot that I wanted to ask you about. So let's start with the tone, because that's one of the most unique and interesting parts of the series. What were some of the touchstones for you both as you were crafting, working on scripts, working with Zakiya? Were there other kind of things? It's so unique, and not to say that it's derivative of anything, because it's not, but were there other novels, were there series, were there films that you said, if we can emulate parts of this and combine it with parts of that, anything that came to mind? Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were both so impressed by Severance. And I think we tried to emulate their sense of spookiness and unease, and sort of not totally knowing at all times, what is real and what's not. But I think, the sense of humor is definitely specifically our sense of humor. Because I think it is very specific to like millennials and how millennials think and talk to each other. And I think we also, I know this is, this is a couple years ago, but I think that we both really loved The Flight Attendant. And one of the things that I really specifically loved about The Flight Attendant, I mean, he does such a great job of balancing genuinely laugh out loud funny moments with, thriller mystery aspects. But I also took away from that show such an appreciation for the way he wrote that female friendship at the center. And I think that really influenced the way that I at least thought about Nella and Malika, and the way to bring that friendship to life and to make it feel balanced and to make it feel true.
Yes, and I mean, the dust jacket says "Get Out" meets Devil Wears Prada, and I think that both of those things, we've said them so many times that it like is painful to say them more, but it is true that both of those, I mean, Nella even says "get out," it references it in the world of the show. So it definitely is. Those were definitely touchstones and tonal comps. But as you said, it was really it wasn't the easiest thing to come up with tonal comps because there really wasn't much out there, especially in the half-hour space that looks like this.
That's true. I'm sorry, my dog is being such a jerk and is asking to come up on my lap over and over again. He keeps hitting me with his snout. We're putting his butt. Come on, if you want to come up, just come. Oh,
I don't think anybody would mind seeing a dog join us. Gus, I wanted to piggyback on something you'd said earlier about, the intentions of Zakiya as she was writing the novel. She's obviously heavily involved in this project, as a producer, writer on episodes. What was that process like for the two of you as showrunners, working with her on not just developing the tone, which you were discussing, but also changes to the novel? We'll talk about maybe some of the major changes that came along the journey. But also just finding, as you were also saying, the structure of the show in half-hour segments, how to leave the audience on these really delicious cliffhangers at the end of every episode where you just need to see what happens next. Talk about that process.
Yeah, we got very, very lucky. We've worked on a couple of projects that are based on IP, and it's very rare that not only is the originator of the IP available and part of the project, but also willing to make changes and willing to understand that this is a different medium. And I think that first and foremost is what the changes were derived from, because television just is so different than a book. You can spend so much more time with the interiority of the protagonist in a novel. You can really follow them and not necessarily need these cliffhangers in the middle to keep you coming back next week. So that already structurally you need to make changes, and you need to expand the world to include other characters and other POVs. And that was, I think, that was the genesis of most of the changes. And Zakiya was completely willing to go along for the ride and to contribute and to acknowledge that, like, oh, there were tons of ideas that I had that weren't in the book, and I have always imagined these characters and their other lives outside of Nella's POV. So I think that she had a lot of fun, and we really, really were very lucky and grateful for the opportunity to work with her.
Yeah, she's just so open. She's so open and collaborative, and so it was really dreamy working with her. I think also, structurally, you asked about the structure of the show. I think, because, like Gus was saying, we could not spend so much time in Nella's head. It just necessitated that she make more decisions faster. And so, and you see that in the very first episode, which Zakiya and Rashida smartly wrote, which was that she says something to Colin immediately. And then you get that reaction from Hazel, and Hazel throws her under the bus in episode 1. And so because of that, Nella became a bit more decisive as a character in our version of her. And so you see this arc that she goes through over the course of the series that she is different than what she goes through in the book. And I think it's part of it is because of that basic difference in her character, that she's a lot more thoughtful and cautious in the book, but she's a lot more, she takes a lot more action in the TV show. And I think that's necessitated by the medium, but I also think it gives us a bit more fun to play with and gives you those cliffhangers, and it gives you the big twist at the end that is different from the book also.
We're definitely going to dive into the end because I'm very excited to ask you about it. But I want to stick with the theme of books just for one more question, because in one of the episodes that you wrote together, I think you wrote 3 together, numbers 2, 3, and 10 for folks who want to go watch them or rewatch them. Nella describes Diana Gordon's book, which is at the heart of the series, Burning Heart, as her comfort novel. I just wanted to know, do you have either a novel or a series? What was that kind of comfort novel for, or show or film for both of you? Jordan, let's start with you.
Oh, don't start with me. It's so embarrassing. I can I can only think of Harry Potter because I've read all of them like 10 times, because that was like such a, he was 11 when I was 11. Like they came out with us as we were growing up. I would say that's definitely, I really love, I'm a huge nerd and I love fantasy novels and sci-fi. And yeah, I've been reading a lot of fantasy novels my entire life, but especially lately. I think that's my comfort zone because it's so disconnected from our reality.
I think the movie that I've seen probably more than any other movie. Oh man. Well, it's probably a tie between Clue and Meet Joe Black. Neither of which are particularly like cinematic masterpieces, but maybe Clue in some circles. But I think
In some circle.
yeah.
What circle?
Gay comedian circles. But I think also, I mean, I think the book that I've read more than any other book, and this is where I'm gonna throw Jordan under the bus. It's All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren, and I think it's my favorite book because I'm erudite and very adult.
That's great. Those are very, I think both of those are great answers. Clue is a classic. A lot of people consider Clue a classic.
I think so. I'm
So-
totally.
Okay.
Obviously.
We know who David is favoring today. I understand.
No. And well, does anybody need to comment on Harry Potter? Like everybody knows that those novels are classic. Like, I had to, Gus needed some help.
Thank you. I definitely, I need lots of help. Unfortunately.
I did want to ask you about casting the series too, because I mean, it's so perfectly cast. The characters, I mean, the performers you have for these roles are you can't imagine anybody else in them. Specifically, your choice of performers for Nella and Hazel, who are so central, and then also, as Richard Wagner, somebody you've worked with in the past, Eric McCormick. So talk about casting Ashley and Sinclair as Hazel and Nella and Eric as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly like what you said. It's so funny. Sinclair and Ashley in particular were just so undeniable that when we saw them, especially when we saw them read together, it was so, I think it was obvious to everyone. There was not, I mean, everyone on the creative side, everyone at the studio and the network, we all were pretty unanimous on that. And it's so interesting. Ashley in particular, well, both of them really influenced the way that we wrote each character. Sinclair is so smart and so determined and thoughtful. And I think, that really, and she's just incredibly talented and good at her job. And so once we saw that we could give her these like big talky monologues where she's like really like going through 5 different emotions and explaining like the dream she had last night, it was like, oh, that's a fun toy to play with. And now that we know you can do it, we're going to keep doing that to you. And Ashley too. Ashley, really brought something unique to Hazel that I think we were not anticipating, which is that Ashley is very warm and very sweet and kind. And so that is not necessarily the Hazel that is like obviously on the page of the novel. And it was around episode 2 or 3 that Ashley said to us, I think Hazel really wants to be Nella's friend. And that was really eye-opening for us. And then we wrote the rest of the season with that thought in mind. And I really think that's what greatly influenced episode 9, with where you get the huge Hazel backstory. I think it would have been a very different backstory if we had not had that in our minds the whole way through. So it was really cool that not only were they like so perfect for these roles, but they really brought something creative and collaborative to the process that helped us write it.
Yes, and Eric was amazing. And we were so happy to work with Eric again. We honestly, working on Will and Grace, Eric is like, it's insane. The thing, you can ask Eric to do anything, and if it's not working, that's not his fault. It's badly written. Like, there's no question you've done something wrong, not Eric, because he can make anything work. He can make anything funny. I think there's this one moment in episode 9, which is like the most serious episode, I think, of the 10 in terms of, yeah, I think so. In terms of the least amount of laugh out loud moments, like actual most dramatic. And the episode's ending, and Richard is revealed, and it's all bad stuff is happening, and Richard like asks his assistant for a yogurt in the middle of this like very serious moment, and I really didn't think this was going to work, and Eric pulled it off because he is unbelievably talented, and I think it just, yes, it spoke to the Richard that we wanted to. The Richard from the book is very different than the Richard that Eric plays, I think, which also contributed to the way that we wrote Richard, because in the book he's sort of this like eclectic intellectual, like
not that Eric is intellectual.
Not that Eric's not intellectual, but he's like a rumpled professor like person in the book, and I think in the television show he much more is he has much more of a sense of humor. He's much more in on the joke. He is self-aware too, and I think he's a little more, and I hope Eric won't hate me for saying this, I think he's a little more vain in the show, which is where you can really get some laughs, because here's this man who has this like crazy international conspiracy that is terrible and racist, and like yet he's incredibly vain. So you can still kind of
he still wants his yogurt.
He still wants his yogurt. He still dresses really well. And he like kind of isn't aware of how ridiculous the entire conspiracy is. So yes, we love Eric. Eric is amazing.
Okay, before I let you both go, I have to ask you about the season finale, which you co-wrote, especially how it ends, because it's such an exciting ending. I feel like the episode really kind of, it draws us into, what the allure of this conspiracy might be. I feel like you really, as you were saying, Jordan, Hazel is such a compelling character that you kind of just want to follow her into whatever she says, right? Like such an incredible and kind of compelling and electric figure. But that ending is so sharp and smart and exciting. And we're hopeful for a season 2. So how did you want to structure this to set up a continuation of the story? Because it's very clear from where this ends how exciting a potential second season could be. Is there anything you can tease about, thoughts you have about next episodes?
Yeah, I mean, we're very excited. We hope that we get the chance to explore season 2, because there's so much more story to tell. And I think that actually, to me, the scene in the finale that sets up a lot of what we want to, the dynamic that we want to play with in season 2, is that final scene between Nella and Hazel, where Nella has the power finally, and Hazel's a little bit on her back foot, and Hazel's like, great, we get to be best friends now. And Nella kind of like puts some distance between them. And that, I think that's going to be a very interesting new relationship for them that they have to navigate. And it's like, Hazel, all along, we saw from episode 9, she's desperate for this community, for a connection. I think it's less about the job for her than it is about like having a friend. And she's done all this bullshit to get the friend, and now she may not have that. And so watching that dream unravel for her in season 2, we're very excited about what does that do to her relationship and her loyalty to Diana and to the entire Grease operation. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think in the show, I think what we really wanted to explore thematically throughout the season, through season 1 especially, was how much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice in order to achieve success? And I think every single person in the office, every single person in the world, in real life as well, makes that decision and makes it differently. And I think you see that play out throughout the season. But I think when you see Nella come back at the end and you see the twist, you understand that, like, is she getting closer to her goal, or is she getting even further from being herself and from being authentic in the office? Like, is her goal to take down this? Yes, her goal is to take down this grease operation. But in order to do so, she has to be even more fake than she was the first season and be even less herself, which is quite a price. So we definitely wanted to explore that in season 2.
Well, we hope to see it. Jordan Reddout and Gus Hickey, congratulations on the first season of The Other Black Girl. Thank you so much for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.